It only takes one moment to change everything. A single accusation, a single glance, and suddenly, everything you knew about yourself is in question. For Maya Davis, it started with a routine trip home from her business conference. She had been flying all day, working tirelessly as a consultant for a human rights organization. She was tired, but there was excitement in the air. Her flight was almost over, and soon, she would be back with her family. But as her plane touched down at the airport, little did she know, her journey home would be nothing like she expected. As Maya moved through the terminal, she felt the usual hum of airport life around her, the hurried footsteps of fellow passengers, the distant sound of an overhead announcement, the swish of rolling luggage. But something felt off. A flicker of discomfort passed through her as she noticed two security officers eyeing her from across the room. Maya had seen this before. Being a black woman in professional settings often meant being underestimated, overlooked, or treated with suspicion. She had learned to brush it off. But this time was different. As she passed through security, one of the officers approached her. "Ma'am, we need to check your bag," the officer said curtly. Maya raised an eyebrow, but she nodded, used to the routine of security checks. She placed her bag on the conveyor belt without hesitation. But then something unexpected happened. The officer didn't stop there. He motioned for another officer to join him. "We're going to need you to come with us," the first officer said, his voice cold. Maya's heart sank. "Why?" she asked, her calm exterior beginning to crack. The officer didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward a nearby room. Maya felt the stares of nearby passengers on her, some of them looking away quickly, others watching the unfolding scene with silent judgment. She wasn't sure if it was just paranoia or if she was truly being singled out. But in that moment, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of discomfort. As she was led through the terminal, Maya fought the knot in her stomach. She had been through countless airport checks before, but this was different. The officers seemed intent on isolating her, as if they already knew what they were looking for. She tried to remain composed, reminding herself of the work she did, the impact she had in her community, the respect she earned over the years. "You don't have to do this," Maya said firmly, her voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of frustration. But the officers remained silent, pushing her forward as they continued their search. Maya's thoughts raced as she was escorted into a small office. Her mind flashed to her father, a respected figure in their community, a man who had taught her to stand up for what was right, no matter the circumstances. She thought of her role in advocating for human rights, of the lives she'd touched with her work, and how this moment, this simple act of profiling, seemed to nullify everything she had ever worked for. She looked up at the security cameras in the room, a feeling of helplessness creeping over her. "This isn't happening," she whispered to herself. But it was. As Maya was about to speak again, the door opened. A new figure entered, someone who was not part of the routine procedure. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw who it was. It was her boss, someone she had been working with closely for the past year, a person she trusted and admired. She hadn't realized she was on the same flight, but seeing him now, standing at the door, was a relief she hadn't known she needed. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice filled with authority. "She's one of my top consultants," he added, his tone sharp. The officers froze, their expressions shifting from indifferent to uncertain. Maya's chest tightened with a mix of anger and relief as she realized the tables were about to turn. Without saying another word, her boss walked into the room and flashed his credentials. The officers stood there, dumbfounded, as the weight of the situation sank in. Maya could feel the power shift in the room. Her boss wasn't just a high-ranking official in the human rights organization. He was a close ally, someone with the power to turn this situation upside down. As he spoke calmly to the officers, explaining the grave misunderstanding, Maya remained silent, her thoughts swirling. She knew she had been wrongfully targeted, but the fact that someone who cared enough to step in had come to her aid made all the difference. The officers, now visibly uncomfortable, muttered apologies as they released her. Maya's hands trembled as she picked up her bag. The relief she felt was immediate, but mixed with the bitter taste of injustice. She was free to go, but the message was clear: nothing would be the same. Maya stepped out of the office and into the bustling terminal, her heart still racing. She glanced around, realizing how much the world had yet to change. But she also knew one thing: no matter the hurdles, she would continue to fight. The system might not always be kind, but it couldn't break her. Maya walked through the airport, her mind still reeling from the events that had just unfolded. The officers, once so confident in their actions, had now been reduced to an awkward silence. Her boss had come to her rescue, and the tension that had gripped her chest loosened, but the experience left an unsettling feeling in the pit of her stomach. She could still feel the eyes of the other passengers on her as she made her way to the gate. Whispers lingered in the air, and for a moment, Maya couldn't help but wonder if they too had witnessed what had just transpired. She had always been one to hold her head high, to face adversity with dignity. But this was different. The subtle discrimination she had experienced earlier wasn't just a personal affront. It was a reminder of the systemic challenges that still existed. As she sat down in the waiting area, Maya tried to calm her nerves. Her flight was delayed, and she had time to think. It wasn't just the officers who had made her feel small, it was the entire system. The way they assumed she didn't belong, the way they treated her like a suspect without reason. How many times had she faced these subtle forms of racism, masked behind polite smiles or indifferent glances? Maya's phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from her father. "I'm proud of you. Stay strong." His words brought her a sense of warmth, and for a brief moment, she felt grounded. Her father had always been her rock, teaching her to fight for justice, to stand tall in the face of injustice. He had faced his own battles, growing up in a time when racism was overt and unforgiving. He had always told her that the fight for equality was never over, and now, more than ever, Maya understood what he meant. She thought back to the day she had made the decision to work in human rights law, to dedicate her life to advocating for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. As Maya sat there, reflecting on her journey, the announcement came over the loudspeaker that her flight was ready for boarding. She stood up, gathering her things, and made her way to the gate. The incident at the airport was still fresh in her mind, but she knew that she couldn't let it define her. She had work to do, lives to change. She walked down the jet bridge, her head held high. As she stepped onto the plane, she found her seat by the window. For a moment, she gazed out at the world below, the sprawling cityscape beneath her. There was so much work to be done, and Maya knew she was just one person. But she also knew that one person could make a difference. She had seen it in her own life, and she would continue to fight for what was right. As the plane began to taxi down the runway, Maya closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was one she was ready to walk. With her heart full of purpose and her mind focused on the future, she felt a quiet sense of determination. This was just another chapter in her journey, and she was prepared to face whatever came next. Maya arrived at her destination later that evening, the events at the airport still weighing heavily on her mind. The feeling of being unfairly treated, the judgment cast upon her because of her skin color, it lingered in her thoughts long after she had boarded the plane. But as the plane soared through the sky, something inside her shifted. She knew that this experience, as painful as it was, could not define her. It was just one moment in a lifetime of struggles, and she had the power to turn it into something meaningful. When Maya stepped off the plane, the cool night air greeted her, and she took a deep breath. It was a welcome change from the sterile atmosphere of the airport. The city she was in now felt familiar, comforting even. Her phone buzzed again. It was another message from her father. "You've got this. Keep pushing for the truth." His words were always a source of strength for her, reminding her of the power of perseverance. As Maya made her way home, she thought about the work that lay ahead. She had been in the field of human rights law for years now, and while she had achieved much, she knew the road ahead would be filled with more challenges. The system wasn't easy to change, but she had seen the impact of her efforts. She had helped countless people find their voices, and now, more than ever, she felt the weight of that responsibility. Maya knew that if she let the injustice at the airport fester, it would only hold her back. The next day, she returned to work. Her office was quiet as she sat down at her desk, the familiar scent of coffee in the air. She looked at the case files in front of her, the thick stack of paperwork that had been waiting for her attention. But today, her focus was sharper than ever. She couldn't let the past hold her hostage. Maya's mission was clear. She had to keep pushing forward, keep fighting for the people who needed her. As the day passed, Maya immersed herself in her work, drafting legal briefs, reviewing documents, and preparing for meetings with clients who depended on her expertise. She was determined to make a difference, and no one, not even the officers at the airport, would stop her from doing what she knew was right. That evening, Maya sat at her kitchen table, reflecting on the day. It had been long and exhausting, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a while. Her work was meaningful, and it mattered. As she picked up the phone to call her father, she felt a renewed sense of gratitude for his unwavering support. The conversation was brief but comforting. He reminded her of the importance of resilience, of standing tall even when the world tried to knock her down. After the call, Maya sat in silence for a moment, thinking about the road ahead. She knew there would be more challenges, more battles to fight. But she also knew she was ready. Maya had faced adversity before, and each time she did, she came out stronger. The injustice she had faced at the airport was just one chapter in her story, and she was determined to write the next chapter with the same courage and conviction that had always defined her. As she finished her dinner, Maya glanced out the window at the city lights below. The world was full of possibilities, and she was determined to make her mark. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the future, for the countless others who needed a voice. And as long as she had the strength to continue, she would never stop fighting for what was right. Maya woke up early the next morning, the quiet of the house surrounding her as she prepared for another busy day. Her mind still lingered on the events of the past few days, the unfair treatment at the airport, the stares, the judgment. But today, something felt different. The weight of it all seemed to have shifted, not completely gone, but less heavy. Maya had always been the type to press forward, to use any challenge as fuel to keep going, and today, she felt ready to channel that energy into her work. As she sat at her desk, the familiar hum of her computer booting up filled the room. Her phone buzzed, pulling her attention away from her screen. It was an email from her colleague, asking for her input on a high-profile case they were working on. The case was complex, involving systemic racism within a major corporation, and Maya's expertise was exactly what was needed. Without hesitation, she dove into the task, immersing herself in the details of the case. Her sharp focus on her work allowed her to momentarily forget the tensions that had clouded her mind. She reviewed legal documents, drafted responses, and made notes, all the while keeping her attention fixed on the task at hand. Maya had always known that the work she did was more than just a job. It was her way of contributing to a larger cause, a way to fight back against the injustices that had shaped her life and the lives of countless others. As the hours passed, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment. She had made significant progress on the case, and her thoughts were clear. It was time to make a call. She reached for her phone and dialed the number of a former client, someone who had faced similar discrimination in the workplace. The call was brief but impactful. Maya's voice was calm but firm as she spoke, offering guidance and support to her client. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that her work could make a difference. After the call, Maya took a moment to breathe. She gazed out the window, the view of the city below offering a sense of perspective. It was easy to get lost in the whirlwind of work, the deadlines, the cases, but it was moments like these that reminded her of why she fought. The next few hours passed quickly as Maya continued to tackle her work, but there was a shift in her energy. She wasn't just pushing through another day. She was making strides, slowly but surely, in changing the system. As the workday came to an end, Maya felt a sense of pride in what she had accomplished. She had faced adversity and turned it into something productive. She had used the pain of her past to fuel her passion for justice. And although there would be more challenges ahead, Maya knew she was ready for them. The next morning, she received a call from her father. His voice, as steady and supportive as always, offered the reassurance she needed. "You're doing important work, Maya. Keep going." Maya smiled as she listened to his words. They were simple, but they meant the world to her. She knew that, with each passing day, she was one step closer to the change she wanted to see. The fight was far from over, but Maya was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been overlooked, for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. And she would not stop until the work was done. Maya's days had begun to blend together in a rhythm of work and reflection. Each morning brought a renewed sense of purpose. Each evening left her with the quiet satisfaction of a day well spent. But as the weeks passed, The weight of the injustice she had faced at the airport never truly left her mind. It was there in the back of her thoughts, a reminder that the world was still not as it should be. She knew she couldn't change everything at once, but she could keep fighting, one small step at a time. The case she had been working on had finally reached a turning point. After days of preparation, Maya sat in the conference room with her colleagues, reviewing the final details before they presented their findings. This was a big moment, one of those rare opportunities where everything aligned, where they could make a real impact. Maya could feel the excitement in the air as the team made their last-minute adjustments, but there was also a sense of urgency. The stakes were high, and they needed to be perfect. As she presented her section, Maya's voice was calm and steady, her confidence growing with every word. She had spent weeks studying the case, analyzing every document, and she knew it inside and out. The work she was doing was critical, and for the first time in a while, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The meeting ended on a high note, with everyone feeling satisfied with the progress they had made. But as Maya walked back to her office, a nagging thought remained. She couldn't shake the feeling that the work they had done, while important, was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Maya had spent years fighting for justice, advocating for those who had been wronged, but she knew that even the most well-executed legal victories wouldn't fix everything. There was still so much more to be done. As she sat at her desk, staring out the window at the city below, Maya reflected on her journey. She thought about the people she had helped, the lives she had touched, and the countless others who still needed her. The work was far from over, but she wasn't alone in this fight. She had built a community of like-minded individuals who shared her vision for a better world. Together, they could make a difference. Maya's phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from her father, just a simple line of text. "I'm proud of you. Keep going." Those words, as always, gave her strength. She smiled to herself, knowing that her father had been through so much in his own life, and yet, he always believed in her. The next few days passed quickly as Maya dove back into her work, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation building inside her. She knew that change was coming, and while it would take time, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Maya had always believed in the power of small victories, in the idea that even the smallest step forward could lead to something much larger. And as she prepared for the next phase of her work, she felt more determined than ever to continue fighting for justice. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been overlooked, for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. And she would never stop until the work was done. Maya had spent the next few days following the case closely, attending meetings and coordinating with her team. The pressure was building, but there was something different in the air this time. She could feel it, the momentum shifting ever so slightly. The determination that had guided her in the past seemed to be fueled by something deeper now, something personal. Her mind kept returning to the incident at the airport, to the way she had been treated, to the way that one moment had sparked a fire inside her. But now, that fire was more than just anger. It was a sense of urgency, a drive to do more, to ensure that her work had a lasting impact. As the week went on, Maya began to focus on the larger picture. She wasn't just fighting individual battles. She was fighting a system that allowed discrimination to thrive. And while she knew she couldn't change everything overnight, she could push for change in the areas that mattered most. One afternoon, Maya found herself sitting across from a colleague, discussing strategy for an upcoming presentation. Her colleague, John, was an ally in the fight for justice, someone she trusted and had worked with on numerous cases. "Maya," John began, "I've been thinking about the long-term impact of this case. It's not just about winning, it's about what comes next. If we succeed, we need to make sure that the changes we push for are sustainable." Maya nodded, her eyes focused on the legal documents spread out in front of them. "I agree," she said. "We need to create a ripple effect, something that will inspire others to take action. It can't just be about this one case. It has to be part of a larger movement." The conversation shifted to the details of the case, but Maya's mind was already racing ahead. She knew that whatever the outcome, she had a responsibility to make sure the fight for justice didn't end when the case was over. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that would require ongoing commitment and effort. Later that evening, Maya received a call from her father. "How's everything going, Maya?" he asked. "Busy," she replied, smiling as she heard the familiar warmth in his voice. But I'm making progress. I feel like things are starting to come together. I'm proud of you, he said simply. Maya could hear the pride in his voice, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of that pride. Her father had been through so much in his life, and he had always believed in her, even when the world seemed to be against her. I'm not done yet, Maya said, her voice filled with conviction. There's still so much to do. After the call, Maya sat for a moment in the quiet of her apartment, reflecting on her journey. She had come so far, but the road ahead was still long. There were more people to help, more battles to fight, and more lives to change. But for the first time in a while, Maya felt a sense of clarity. She knew what she was doing mattered. The fight for justice wasn't just about one person or one case. It was about something much bigger, about building a world where equality and fairness were more than just ideals. Maya had always believed in the power of small victories, in the idea that each step forward, no matter how small, was a step toward a better future. And as she looked ahead, she knew she was ready for whatever came next. The challenges would be many, but she had learned to embrace them, to face them head-on with the same strength and determination that had carried her this far. Maya's journey wasn't over. In many ways, it had only just begun. Maya sat in her office, staring at the case files in front of her. The weight of her work had become almost tangible, a constant presence that she couldn't shake. But today, there was something different in the air. Her team had made significant progress on the case, and for the first time in weeks, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment. The fight for justice wasn't easy, but she was beginning to see the fruits of her labor. As she went through her notes, she thought about the people she had met along the way, the ones whose stories had shaped her journey. She remembered the faces of those who had been wronged, the ones who had suffered quietly for so long. It was for them that she did this work, that she pushed forward even when it felt impossible. The phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was John, one of her closest colleagues. Maya, he said, his voice filled with excitement. We've got it. The evidence we've been waiting for. It's here. Maya's heart skipped a beat. This was the breakthrough they had been hoping for, the key piece of the puzzle that could turn everything around. What's the next step? She asked, already standing up and grabbing her coat. We need to act fast, John replied. The opposition will try to bury this, but we can't let them. We need to get it to the right people, and we need to make sure it gets the attention it deserves. Maya didn't hesitate. She knew exactly what needed to be done. She gathered her things and left her office, her mind racing with possibilities. She was determined to see this through, no matter what it took. The journey had been long, but she wasn't about to stop now. As she walked to her car, Maya felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. It wasn't just about winning the case anymore. It was about making sure the truth was heard, making sure the people who had been wronged finally got the justice they deserved. The drive to the courthouse was a blur. Maya's thoughts were focused on the task ahead, her eyes scanning the road but not really seeing it. When she arrived, she was met by her team, all ready to push forward with the next phase of the plan. This is it, Maya said, taking a deep breath as she looked around at the faces of her colleagues. We've come this far, and we're not stopping now. They moved quickly, each person knowing their role. There was no time to waste, and Maya's resolve was stronger than ever. As the day wore on, Maya and her team worked tirelessly to ensure that the evidence was presented in the most compelling way possible. They fought against the clock, knowing that once the information was out, there would be no turning back. But Maya wasn't afraid. She had seen how the system worked, how the powerful could sometimes manipulate the truth, but she also knew that when the truth came to light, nothing could stand in its way. By the time the court session ended, Maya felt a quiet satisfaction. The wheels of justice had started to turn, and there was no stopping them now. As she left the courthouse, Maya took a moment to reflect. She had come a long way, and while the road ahead was still uncertain, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. The fight for justice was never easy, but Maya was more determined than ever to see it through to the end. She had found her purpose, and with that purpose came an unshakable resolve. The journey was far from over, but Maya was ready to face whatever came next. Maya spent the next few days in a flurry of meetings and late-night research sessions, the case becoming the center of her world. Her thoughts were consumed with strategy, the need to ensure that every piece of evidence was presented perfectly. But even in the midst of the pressure, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted within her. She wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. She was fighting for something deeper, something personal. Her mind kept drifting back to that moment at the airport, the feeling of being looked down upon, judged without cause. She knew it wasn't just about her, that she wasn't the only one who had experienced this. There were so many others who had faced the same challenges, the same discrimination. And she couldn't help but feel that this case, this fight, was a way for her to stand up not only for herself, but for all those who had been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. She knew the stakes were high. As the day of the final hearing approached, Maya's focus intensified. The pressure was mounting, but she didn't feel it as much as she had before. Instead, she felt an overwhelming sense of determination, a conviction that this was the moment she had been preparing for. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and now, she was ready. On the day of the hearing, Maya arrived early, the courthouse eerily quiet as she made her way inside. Her team was already there, reviewing last-minute details, but Maya knew there was nothing more she could do now. She had put everything into this case, and now it was time to let the truth speak for itself. As she sat down in the courtroom, Maya took a deep breath, her fingers lightly tapping on the table in front of her. The room felt charged with energy, every person in the room aware of the significance of what was about to unfold. The judge entered, and everyone stood in respect, but Maya remained seated, her gaze focused and steady. The proceedings began, and Maya listened carefully to the arguments being presented, her mind calculating, analyzing every word. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she wasn't afraid. She had faced adversity before, and this time, she was ready. The opposition was strong, their arguments well-rehearsed, but Maya remained confident. She knew the truth was on her side, and no matter how hard they tried to twist the facts, it wouldn't change the reality of what had happened. As the case progressed, Maya spoke only when necessary, her words measured and precise. She didn't need to say much. Her presence in the courtroom, her calm demeanor, spoke volumes. The turning point came when Maya stood to present the key piece of evidence, the one they had all been waiting for. She spoke clearly, outlining the facts, and with a quiet sense of triumph, she revealed the evidence that would change everything. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment sinking in as the opposition tried to process what had just happened. It was over. Maya knew the case wasn't entirely won yet, but she felt the tide turning in her favor. As the hearing drew to a close, Maya stood with her team, the exhaustion of the past few days finally catching up with her. But there was also a sense of peace in knowing that she had done everything she could. The outcome was uncertain, but she had stood her ground, and in that, she found strength. Walking out of the courtroom, Maya felt a sense of relief, but it was mixed with anticipation. This was just the beginning. She had more battles to fight, more injustices to right, but now, she felt more prepared than ever. The fight for justice wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but Maya had found her path, and she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Maya sat quietly in her office, the files from the case scattered across her desk. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, and now, as the final verdict approached, she found herself reflecting on everything that had led her here. The courtroom battle had been intense, but it wasn't just the legal strategy that had driven her. It was the personal stake in the fight for justice. She thought back to the moment she'd been treated unfairly, to the helplessness she'd felt, but also to the strength that had risen from it. She had channeled that feeling into her work, and it had given her the courage to keep pushing, even when the odds seemed stacked against her. The judge's gavel had finally come down, and the case was over. Maya had won, but the victory felt different from what she had expected. It wasn't about the personal satisfaction of beating the opposition. It was about knowing that her fight had made a difference. She had taken a stand, not just for herself, but for those who couldn't. The feeling of the courtroom shifting, of the truth being revealed, was something Maya would never forget. She knew that the road to justice was a long one, and this was only one battle. But in that moment, she realized how far she had come, and how much farther she had to go. Maya stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. The skyline stretched out before her, a symbol of the challenges ahead. There was still so much to be done, so many more lives to touch. But as she stood there, she felt a quiet sense of peace. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. She had a community of people, allies who shared her vision and were committed to the same cause. That, in itself, was a victory. The phone rang, and Maya turned back to her desk. It was her father again. His voice, as warm and steady as always, greeted her on the other end. "I'm proud of you, Maya. I always have been." Maya smiled. "Thanks, Dad. It's been a long road, but we're getting there." After the call, she sat back in her chair, her thoughts drifting back to the work ahead. She had made a mark, but the work wasn't over. The injustice in the world wasn't going to disappear overnight. Maya had always known that. But now, more than ever, she understood the power of small steps. It was the small victories, the quiet moments of change, that ultimately added up to something bigger. Maya wasn't just an attorney fighting for justice. She was part of a movement. And that movement was gaining momentum. She knew the road would continue to be difficult, but she had found her place in the fight. And as long as she had the strength to continue, she would keep pushing for what was right. She would keep fighting for those who needed a voice. With a deep breath, Maya stood up, ready to take on whatever came next. The journey wasn't over, but she was ready to face it head-on, with the same determination and purpose that had gotten her this far. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Maya felt ready to embrace it.